Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome to yet another edition of Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. Well, ever since the last time I saw you, which was 2 weeks ago, so much has happened in the world. Of course, what is happening down in America, the protests after the brutal racist murder of George Floyd. And that is something we're going to be discussing in the second half an hour of the show. We are going to be talking with an African-American activist in New York City to discuss what is going on in the United States, in what is significantly one of the most important pieces of history ever since the civil rights movement in the 1950s and the 1960s. Of course, schools are set to reopen on June the 8th. Now, do remember, it was supposed to reopen on June the 1st. Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, was due to hold a press conference on the 31st of May. Well, that changed, because if flip-flopping was a competition, the Minister of Basic Education would surely be a contender for it, which means on June the 8th, schools will now reopen. But the question does remain. Are schools ready, especially with the peak of COVID-19 yet to strike in South Africa? So, of course, in the first half an hour, I'm going to have the privilege to speak to four bright young matriculants who are, of course, ready to go to school on June the 8th. But the question is, are the schools ready to accommodate students, especially with social distancing being a problem? So let me welcome the four students. I have with me Arne Thiesi from Afrikaans Hoër Meisie School. I also have Atalia Ibrahim from Kliptown Secondary School. I have Godwin Taweni from Geluksdal Secondary. And I have Miriam Jacobs from Al Ghazali College. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Truth to Power.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, guys. Godwin, I'm going to start with you. Let's just talk about Geluksdal Secondary. What have the teachers been telling you with regards to preparations, but most importantly, the healthcare within that facility?
Well, I understand that the schools were supposed to open last week already, but then the schools were not ready yet. So the teachers communicated with us to say we are starting next week, Monday, which is the 8th of June. They promised us that we will be ready, and they are vaccinated in school, and clear cleaning process is happening to make sure that our health comes first.
Yeah, I think that's going to be most important, and that's going to be the health of the pupils. Arne, I want to come to you. I think when looking at the healthcare, that is something that's going to be important. How prepared is your school? What has been the communication towards you and your parents with regards to getting you guys ready to go to school?
Well, every week my headmistress has sent us voice notes on updating us on how the school has been preparing for us. And our school has made a lot of preparations. They sent us a video of how the school system is going to work. We're going to get to school and we're going to walk. They have like markers for social distancing. And then we're going to stay in that lane, and then we're each going to have our own QR code, which we're going to have. And then they're going to take our temperature and ask the COVID-19 questions, and then scan the QR code, which is going on a system for all our indications or stuff. And then we're also going to walk through this sanitizing system booth thing, which is going to spray our whole body. And then this is going to happen 3 times a day.
Well, yeah, I think that's going to be very important. Of course, the sanitization of the pupils, because social distancing, again, is going to be a massive issue. But according to Arne from Afrikaans Hoër Meisie School, it seems as if they've got their ducks in order, and of course, to make sure that there won't be infections in that school. And hopefully that does not happen. Talia, I want to ask you, how is your school prepared with regards to dealing with COVID-19 and taking so many pupils who, of course, are in matric?
Honestly speaking, I don't think that they are ready because all of our teachers aren't even sure if we should go back, because with regard to sanitation, our school hasn't gotten anything as yet.
Let me ask Miriam Jacobs from Al Ghazali College. Miriam, how has been the preparations for the reopening of your school? Have the teachers communicated with you and your parents to how things are going to be when you guys do return on Monday?
Actually, we've already attended school. We opened on
Okay.
Monday because of the fact that we fall under ISASA. So they allowed us to open up. And according, like with all the regulations and protocol, it's been quite nice because everything that needs to be done has been done. And we have a very systematic way in which we go to school and we are sanitized and our temperatures are taken. So with being back at school already, I'm quite happy with like our school's way of managing it.
So Miriam, of course, you just said now that obviously Al-Ghazali College has opened because, of course, fallen under a different division of the education department. I just want to ask you, Miriam, with regards to social distancing, has it been something that has been practiced within your school?
Definitely, definitely. They've set up our tables in a certain way. They've ensured that all the learners have a briefing of what they need to do. And also there's stickers on the floor that indicates where we should be going. They even went to the extent of explaining to us which direction we need to walk around the school in order to make sure that when the other learners come back as well, we will maintain the social distancing.
That's good to hear. Well, of course, Al-Ghazali College, as Miriam said, has reopened, of course, for matriculants. And I think that is important. Of course, education for children is important, but there needs to be a balance with regards to, is it safe enough for pupils to return, especially with the peak of COVID-19 still to strike South Africa. Godwin, I want to come back to you. Godwin, in your school, in Geluksdal Secondary, is there a possibility of social distancing being the case? I don't know how many pupils, of course, are in attending to your school, but you've been there for a very long time. What are the chances that social distancing can be practiced in your school? And do you believe it's still healthy enough for you and your classmates to return and continue for the rest of the year?
Yes, sir. Speaking from a grade 12 perspective, we are happy that we can return to school and finish our final year. But grade 12s are also concerned because, I mean, we are dealing with grade 12s from different households, coming from different communities or different areas. We meet with different people every day. So hence, we do not have a choice but to follow the rule. Yes, social distancing will, and I believe will be a success. Even because I believe we are with matured matriculants. These are mature people, so they understand what is happening.
And I think that's important, Godwin, the fact that you guys are matured, which means you know and the rest of your classmates know the extent of what this virus is. And another question I want to ask is the teachers, I mean, how prepared are they with regards to coming back to school? Have they been communicating with you and the rest of your classmates?
Our teachers have been stressed, so we have been really updated on what is happening, how the vaccination has been happening. So when we spoke to the teacher this afternoon we were asking a question, and she gave us info. She said Monday everybody needs to bring their own lunch, they need to bring their own bottles and so on. So we are not sharing stuff anymore. And she said that social distancing will be a part, even with pens and stuff like this. So I believe the teachers is when they are giving us the heads up. So I believe they are prepared because they are giving us heads up as how we will be operating.
Ane, I want to come to you. Of course, you just said that social distancing, there's going to be marking that's going to be happening in your school. So, of course, the importance of that, you heard Godwin saying that, you know, you guys are very mature and you are the future of South Africa with regards to making sure that the economy will be able to function. So how important do you think it is that you guys as matriculants have the ability to use that maturity and practice social distancing?
Well, if we don't practice social distancing, we're not going to be able to go back to school and not finish our year. And I think it's really important that all the matriculants of South Africa finish this year, because then if we don't go, nobody's going to go to university, and there's going to be a huge gap where nobody's going to be at university or studying, and people are just going to stop. The economy.
No problem.
The economy is going to fail because of that gap, which there's going to be no persons like opening new businesses or working in hospitals or new teachers.
Well, I think that's going to be very important. You can see the determination of all of these pupils to go back to school. But the question is it still a healthy environment? Well, all four students will be joining me still after the break. We'll come back and we will discuss going back to school during COVID-19. Welcome back to Truth to Power. We are still talking with four bright young matriculants who are, of course, ready to go back to school on Monday. Now, I want to go straight to Talia Ibrahim. Talia, you said that your school's not ready to open. Is this something that your school has addressed with the Gauteng Department of Education and, of course, the Basic Education Department? Has your school been communicating to these two departments to make sure that you guys will be ready when school reopens?
I don't know, as the teachers have a group chat with our parents, so they communicate with our parents, and they've just told our parents that since the 1st of June, since the dates have been given, that our school has not been sanitized. No updates have been given to say that they have received the objects to sanitize the school. None of that was done.
Well, I think that's going to be a real concern, and hopefully, the Gauteng Education Department can go ahead and assist Kliptown Secondary, and of course the Basic Department of Education can go ahead and assist Kliptown Secondary with regards to that. Miriam, of course you have been telling us that Al Ghazali College open this week. Just give us the 5 days that has gone through with regards to you guys, and what difference has there been from how school was pre-COVID-19 to how school is now during the pandemic?
To be honest, it's been really different and weird because we're so used to speaking to each other in a closer distance. We're so used to hugging our friends and interacting on a personal level. And now we have to ensure that we are following the school rules and ensuring that we don't pass on, if we possibly interact with people that have COVID-19, we don't pass it on. For example, like sitting around your friends during break and eating lunch will seem like a normal thing, but it's definitely different now that we're back after COVID, because we can't even have like a personal conversation. There's the markings even while we're sitting and eating lunch. So it's been quite hectic and really, really different.
Yeah, I can only imagine, because I mean, everyone wants to be around their friends. That's what makes schools, fun. Being around your friends, having the conversations, inspiring each other, especially at a time in matric where, the pressure is really on so many pupils. So, I mean, it's definitely going to feel very, very different. Godwin, I want to come to you. Personally, when you look at what's going on across the country, I know that obviously Gauteng at this moment isn't the epicenter of the virus, but I want to ask you, are you personally prepared to go to school? What are your fears? Are you afraid to go back to school, especially with the peak still to happen in South Africa?
To be honest, I am really. Can I answer this two ways? Firstly, I am excited because I am going to finish my last year, which we have been waiting for a very long time. Like I said, we are different. We are coming from. We meet different people, so we don't know who your next neighbor or your friend is interacting with, who has the virus or something like that, and now they coming to you and you are meeting with these people. So what
I think we're losing
another person who has been infected.
Well, I can hear the fear right there, Godwin, and I think you are very excited, but also at the same time that there's a lot of concern with regards to coming, for you guys returning to school. As you said, there's a number of people from different areas, and the question, of course, about personal protective gear for everyone, not just the pupils, but of course for the staff, for the teachers. I think that is something that's going to be of real concern. Ane, I want to come to you. Very same question I posed to Godwin. Are you personally prepared to go to school? What are your fears about returning on Monday?
Well, I'm a little bit nervous just because of how new everything's going to be, the unknown. But I'm really prepared. Like, I've worked the whole lockdown. Our teachers communicated with us. We had tests that we wrote and we got our marks back. So we've been doing our work. We're on schedule as we should have been, like, at school. And, well, yeah, that's basically it. I'm really prepared and I'm not scared. I know it's going to be new and a challenge, but we'll adapt.
Well, I hope you guys do adapt, and I think that's very, very important, of course, making sure that the spread of the virus does not hit the schools, because once it hits the schools, I think we are really going to be in a lot of danger. Talia, I want to come to you, very, very same question, but of course you did say that there is a Kliptown Secondary is not prepared for the reopening. Have you spoken to your parents about maybe not wanting to go to school until there is proper healthcare and, of course, there's proper testing facilities for you and your classmates to return to school?
I have spoken, and my mom actually wants me to just repeat next year because of the safety hazards.
And are you prepared to repeat for next year, Talia?
No, honestly, I'm not. Like, I actually want to just finish. I've been waiting for so long. It's like, I can't.
Now, I can hear the concern in your voice, and I think it's very, very important that you need to decide, Talia, whether your healthcare, of course, finishing school is important, because you'll always have another chance. I think that is very important. You will have another chance to complete your matric year, but you need to look after yourself, and I think that is very important. Mariam, I want to ask you, of course, you finished your first week. Personally, are you prepared to go ahead and finish the entire year? Do you feel confident that your school, from a healthcare perspective and, of course, from a capacity perspective, that you guys will be ready to complete the rest of the year?
Definitely. If the school has done everything possible to make sure that each and every student feels safe and is accommodated for. The times of the school has been adjusted. We've been provided with extra time between periods to ensure that we are sanitized personally, and the equipment and tables and chairs are sanitized. All the measures have been taken, and I'm really confident that my school will be able to stay open without having any glitches healthcare-wise.
Mariam, before I go to the rest of the guests that have joined us, I want to ask you, I know you guys have been watching a lot of television and have been hearing the basic education minister. When you listen to her, because of course they are the leadership of the country, are you guys convinced that you guys have the right leaders in terms of the education department? I'm going to start first with you, Mariam.
In terms of, that's a bit difficult to answer because personally we don't know what they are going through. But to be honest, I think possibly they are making the right decisions with the students' best interest at heart.
Well, hopefully that is the case, because you guys are, of course, the interests that are at heart, and what's best for you is what's best for the education system. I'm going to ask you that question, Godwin. When listening to Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, are you convinced that she has the interests at heart for you guys?
I believe that the decisions that they're making it's the best for the learners, and they are really looking out for the learners who have to go back to school. So I trust the decisions that they are taking, and I really, really hope that it will be the best decision.
Ane, I want to ask you that question. Are you convinced by the leadership of the country that they are looking after you guys and what's good for you?
Yes, I think they do, because, well, they've extended lockdown another week just for the school lockdown, for the other schools that hasn't been prepared, so that they can prepare those schools so that the proper rules and regulations are, the steps are being taken care of, and that everybody's going to be safe, and they want to be sure that all the learners stay healthy at schools that weren't ready this week.
Talia, I want to ask you that question. Do you believe that Minister Angie Motshekga has the interests of you guys at heart?
She does. we all know that the government is under a lot of stress right now, and honestly speaking, it's up to the rest of the world to just work together to make everything possible, especially with the matriculants. We're under a lot of stress and we just need support from every center that we can get. So, yes.
Okay, well, one final question, guys. I mean, when the year is completed, when you guys do go to school, and I believe that you guys will, matriculate with good marks. Godwin, I want to start with you. When you do finish school, what is your intention?
Uh, in my house, we don't believe in sitting at home. We don't believe in becoming nothing. So I believe next year I should finish my studies and start working.
Okay, no, and I wish you all the best, Godwin, and hopefully all that you are wanting will be able to go ahead and become successful. Ane, question to you: when you finish school, what is your plans?
I'm gonna go study, and then after I study, I want to do my honors and my masters in my degree, and then I want to open my own business.
Hopefully that will happen and you will become a success in your business. Talia, same question to you. What is your plans after school?
I think after Corona, getting out of my scenery is a must do. So I like to pay for a year and then study business management thereafter.
Well, I can see we're going to have, one great, economic thinker in you, and hopefully that will be the case. And Miriam, the question to you, your plans after school?
Inshallah, I plan to study medicine, and then hopefully, if something like this does happen again, I'll be able to help those, like the health workers have been helping everyone in our country.
Yeah, I'm into that. And, that is something, I think you're heading in the right direction, helping those that are in need, especially in a healthcare system like ours that continually is getting tested. Guys, thank you so much for making the time for us. I think the one thing from myself and the rest of South Africa for you guys as students is that when you do return to school, your focus will not be on COVID-19 and whether you're going there with fear of getting the virus. The focus should be finishing matric, getting the best marks, and going ahead and really making South Africa proud when you guys get your results and contributing to South Africa and making it a better nation for all. And I think that is my only message to you guys, that you can go ahead and study and make the biggest impact that is possible. So from our pupils, the 4 pupils, Godwin Taweni from Gelukdal Secondary, Ane Theas from Afrikaans Hoër Meisie School, Talia Ibrahim from Kliptown Secondary School, and Miriam Jacobs from Al Ghazali College. They went ahead and gave us half an hour of their time, especially now with them preparing for school. Guys, all the best, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, guys. Well, there you go. 4 bright pupils who are ready to go ahead and make their impact this year. But of course, the question is, how will the effect of COVID-19 be with regards to schools, especially with the peak yet to happen in South Africa? Well, after the break on Truth to Power, of course, something that has rocked the world for the last 10 days, the brutal racist murder of George Floyd. It has, of course, developed the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement and, of course, the hashtag justice for George Floyd. What is the impact with it? I'm going to be speaking to an African-American activist after the break. Welcome back to Truth to Power. Of course, we are in the last half an hour. For the last 10 days, there have been protests across the United States of America. This after one of the saddest moments in American history happened in Minneapolis, the murder of George Floyd. And of course, if you did see the video, we saw a police officer, a racist police officer, going ahead and putting his knee onto the neck of George Floyd. I personally could only fathom to watch 10 seconds. I couldn't do it anymore. And of course, the history of South Africa, seeing how the South African police service under the National Party, the apartheid government, used to do the very same thing to black Africans here in South Africa. It was something that I could not go ahead and watch anymore. But it has brought up protests and, of course, brought up two important hashtags: Black Lives Matter and, of course, justice for George Floyd. Now, joining me via Skype from New York City, he's a renowned chef who is, of course, and we know the food within the United States is something that a lot of people go ahead and have great things to say about, but he's also an activist and somebody who's, of course, been heavily involved in talking with regards to what has happened in the last week. I am joined by Nduvuakim Abdusalam. Nduvuakim, thank you so much for joining us on Truth to Power.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Nduvuakim, just give the viewers here in South Africa an idea of what has been happening in the last 10 days.
Well, what's been happening is basically it's been a buildup. Prior to George Floyd, there were a few other incidents a week before, a month before, and I think that was just a tipping point. And that has been the catalyst for a bigger movement now. It's just about us gaining the rights and be able to just live as humans in this country that I know I pay a lot of taxes. My grandfather and fathers, they fought for this country, and it's to not have that justice and to just be able to walk freely as a free man in this country. That's something that's being demonstrated currently. So here in New York, I mean, I can tell you that it's basically they've been in most of the affluent neighborhoods demonstrating because they're the ones with the power and they're the ones who are determining who is in power and who are the policymakers. And while most of the protests is peaceful, there seems to be some infiltration of other organizations who would want to make the movement look bad on Black people. But I will say, for the most part, it's a long time coming. It's a good thing, and the next step, because this is the first phase of it, is now that we've got their attention and we've got everyone's attention. I think we've got the world's attention. How do we resolve the issues of the inequality? And I don't think I'm sure every continent has their own version of it. And as you guys know, in South Africa and in many other parts of the world.
Nduvuakim, I want to speak about, African Americans living in the United States under Donald Trump. I know African Americans have gone through the greatest inequalities that has ever happened. We talk about the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. We talk about slavery during the 1800s, which led to the American Civil War. As an African American, just explain to people in South Africa the difficulties of living in the United States, especially under a president who practices right-wing policies like he's running out of fashion.
Well, I can tell you from my personal experience, once Trump got into power, because prior to that we had a Black president, once he got into power, I can definitely see a shift in the mentality of white Americans. And when things were happening against Black people, Trump as a president would never come out and say basically it's wrong. He was obviously taking sides, which fuels the whites, the KKK, whatever they believe in. It would fuel them to keep doing what they're doing, and as well as the policymakers. I know as a businessman that things are administered for Black businesses, but from my perspective and from my experience, I find my white counterparts who would go for the same loans or the same grants, they would have it within a day or two, and I'd still be working on it 3 months later only to get rejected. And while they say these policies and and these laws are in place for everyone, the thing is, it's mostly white people who are administering it, and they're the ones who are making decisions on who gets these things. And unfortunately, as African Americans, we're not. And I can tell you that Black businesses has been suffering. The education in the Black communities, they're just not equivalent to the white communities, and it's been going on long enough at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Unduvuaki, when you speak of this, it's reminiscent actually of what's happening in South Africa also, where Black Africans themselves are really struggling in an economy which is controlled by the minority. And I think that is something which is really, really sad. Unduvuaki, police brutality. Now, we saw, of course, what happened with George Floyd, but you said this has been something which has been ongoing. And it's not ongoing for the last, decade. It's been ongoing for 400 years, the moments Africans were taken as slaves from the continent and brought to America. But when you look at police brutality, just how bad is it, especially towards African Americans?
Well, I being in New York, I remember in the early 2000s, there was literally a card that these officers would carry with them that had a profile. And the profile was, if the person looked like this, it was a stop and frisk. You stop them and you question them. And of course, it was basically a picture of an African American with a certain style of dress. And so this has been ongoing for as long as for as long as I've been in America, and I've been here for 44 years now. And it's just, if I can tell you a quick story, I live in Long Island City, and it's a pretty prominent neighborhood. And I know that I woke up one day and I work out, and I wanted to go. I like to work out in the park. And I think it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I thought to myself that the first thing came to my mind was that, you know what? Don't go out there, because God forbid a cop drives by and he sees you out there. It can go left really fast. And I'm thinking to myself that, why should I have to think about this? This is my neighborhood. I pay a premium to live in this community. And I can't go out of my house at certain times of day. And that just, even though I've been more privileged than a lot of African Americans, I felt like I was no different than a George Floyd or any of the other African Americans who had their lives taken at any point. And I don't know who would want to live like that.
Now, I think living in fear is probably the worst thing that any person, and as you say, you pay a premium to live in that neighborhood in Long Island, you pay your taxes towards your business, and you're still living in fear. That is something no citizen in any parts of the world should go through. Nduvuaki, stay tuned after the break. You and I will continue this conversation about what it is to be African American in Donald Trump's United States. Welcome back to Truth to Power. I'm still joined by Nduvuaki Abdusalam from New York City. Nduvuaki, please, you are going to go ahead and say something, of course, just before the ad break. Please do go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to say as well was that it's always been a fight for Black people here. But a lot of those rules and those policies impact people that are not just Black, but I feel like they never support the Black cause either, because essentially, like the civil rights movement, it was a Black movement, but everyone else that was not of white descent, they benefited from it. and they didn't lose their lives, and they didn't lose their loved ones in it. And I feel it's the same thing now in today's time. And I think that we need more support from the outside people that are not Black.
Yeah, and Vuaki, I want to actually talk about that because I mean there have been other groups that have been supporting you guys. Like these, I want to give an example like the Hispanic community. I mean they have been also under tremendous pressure ever since Donald Trump has come into power, and of course the Arab Americans immediately after September 11th, went through a lot of persecution in the United States. Have you been getting, has the movement, the current movement that is going on, been getting supports from other minority Americans?
No,
Is it?
no, not really. I think when it comes to support from the colored community in America, it's always the Black community that supports the underprivileged and whatever other organizations or a group of people that feel that they're not being done right by the system in America.
And Joachim, I want to talk about what's happened here in South Africa. I don't know whether the media in the US have been obviously giving these stories. Here in South Africa, 2 months ago, a gentleman by the name of Colin Scorza died at the hands of the South African National Defence Force and the South African police. Of course, the military ombudsman had cleared them. But when I'm looking at what happened with Colin Scorza, and Colin Scorza is just one example, there have been many that have died under the hand of the SANDF and the police so far during the nationwide lockdown we've been having here in South Africa. When you're listening to those stories from South Africa and corresponding to what's happening in the USA, you just find that Black people, African people overall are still suffering no matter what system that they've been put under.
Yeah, very true. It's the same thing in Paris, where a friend of mine just told me that they banned them from protesting. I've seen protests in England, and it's in Brazil. It's all, if you have dark skin anywhere in this world, that seems to be the issue. But I think the bigger issue is that we're not connected like we should be. But this is an opportunity to connect as a whole, whether you're Africa or from the diaspora. I think it's the best time because of the internet and because of social media. But I think that's the biggest thing in the past is that we've been tricked into thinking that our situation is different than the South African or Parisian or Brazilian Black, and we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I think that is the one important aspect is that Black Africans still continue to be, oppressed no matter what system, no matter what government they are living in. And Hakim, of course, in the 1950s and the 1960s, we had the civil rights movement, great heroes such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and then, of course, in the arts and the sports industry, Sam Cooke, and, of course, Muhammad Ali. When looking at now and looking at back then, what are the similarities or what is the difference with regards to the two movements that are happening at this very moment?
The clear-cut difference is there isn't a leader today. We don't have a Martin Luther King. We don't have a Malcolm X, nor do we have a Medgar Evers. The only similarity is that we do have athletes that's speaking out about it the same as they did back then. But I think the difference with that as well is that we can't mistake them for our leaders, because at the end of the day, he's an athlete and he can't speak about the economics of an African American. But he can use his platform to raise these questions, and we need to turn to the professionals and in the community to handle those things. But as far as, it's still on a lot of levels, it's still more peaceful than it was, because from the the pictures and the videos, and from what my mom has told me, it was a lot more violent. They were beating people. There wasn't the social media. So a lot of people lost their lives, and it went unreported. Whereas now, if something happens, you see it right away. So I think that's the similarities in that, but I think it's still a different movement on some levels.
Yeah, and Joachim, you raised the issue, of course, of athletes. I mean, just before I came on air, I think on CNN, there was an interview, of course, with one of the NFL athletes, and I think the NFL athletes have been one of the biggest, one of the biggest figures to go ahead and say, well, we're going to take the kneeling, of course, during NFL matches. And I think the importance of that. And then I read before we came on air that Kanye West had donated 2 million rand towards George Floyd's funeral. And I think a number of other African Americans who had lost their lives due to police brutality. With regards to athletes and musicians, because there's a huge African American influence with regards to the arts and entertainment industry, and the, of course, with regards to athletes and sports, how important is their platform going to be to make sure that African American voices are heard, especially during these difficult times?
Well, I think they've been the consistent because they have the platform to voice the concerns of African Americans. But I think where we need to pivot now is that they need to hand the mic over to the professionals, the Black economists, the Black historians, the people who handle Black matters on the granular level, that have the solutions for Black people as a whole, that we can progress and succeed in the society. Because again, an athlete's an athlete, and he can say how he feels about Black issues because they are Black as well. But once that issue is raised, what are we doing after that? What are the plans? What do we really want as a people? Because it seems like we get the platform, but then we leave it for them to figure it out. And we need to have bullet point what our needs are, and how we see ourselves moving forward in this society. Because while it's America, it's a very divided America, and the rules, and they will throw the rules in your face and say, well, these are American policies. Are you not American? But at the same time, when you do hold them to that, then they say, well, you're not really American, and it's only for a certain type of Americans. So we need to document exactly what it is we need, what policies need to be changed. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please do finish, Joachim.
And what policies that we need to be put in place for us, so that we can succeed, and that my kids and my friends and family can succeed from now and into the future.
And I think what's important is, of course, having the balance between patriotism, civil liberties, and of course human rights, making sure that all three can go ahead and balance itself, so that every single person in the United States of America is living under the perfect equality that the nation really does deserve. And Joachim, I would like to ask you one final question. We know that when Africans came to America, it wasn't by, a choice. It was by force. It was, of course, due to transatlantic slavery and the laws and the policies that were given to transatlantic slavery, because it was run like a business. And unfortunately, it was African people who bore the brunt of it all. The legacy of 400 years, how has it still having its impact in the United States of America?
Well, it's obvious that for about 200 plus years of those, the African American was not educated, and they weren't able to vote, so you didn't have any power. Then when you were able to vote, and they used tactics to try and deter African Americans from voting. I think the biggest thing is education for African Americans, and really understanding what this country was built in, how it was built, and what the laws are. Because I know my white friends, what's said in writing, there's also an unwritten doctrine, and it's been handed down verbally through the generations that we don't have, that we're not privy to that. But as well, it's just disheartening that the color of your skin is, it just determines where you are in life, what you will become. And if you want to be better than that, you're gonna have to work until you almost kill yourself. And I mean, I don't think they see us as humans on the same level as they see themselves, because just like we were a 3/5 of a man back then, I still think that rule applies. And that's why you can kill and taking another life and not have any remorse or any sympathy for that person, and not even be able to put yourself into that situation and say, what if this is my child? What if this is my brother? Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. But it's obvious when you can't do that, you don't see us as humans.
And Nduvuakim, just to end this off, what now? What is the future? Because we've seen many incidents where the kneeling, obviously 3 years ago, during the NFL matches, and then all of a sudden there was a dying down and the media wasn't covering, as you say, many police brutal attacks on African Americans. Surely now it has to stop.
Well, I think the difference then and now is it's unequivocally there isn't a divide, because the media with Trump spent that demonstration into blacks against the flag, and he misrepresented what the movement was, and most people fell into that trap, and it became, and when I say most people, it was mostly white people who fell into that trap and said, yeah, that's right, because my grandfather fought in a war for this country, not so they can. Meanwhile, at the same time, they're not realizing the same black guy that's kneeling in protest of what America is representing, their grandfathers and fathers fought in the same war to come back to the country, to not enjoy any of those liberties that they fought for, and have to sit back and watch their white counterparts enjoy all of that. So moving forward, I think it's definitely, we're all on the same page, and I hope we can all stay on that same page moving forward. But now, like I've said, that we have this platform, we as a people need to come together, and we need to list what we need, and we need to make sure that they carry it out. And it's not, we don't get a handout for a few $1 million from some corporations and from the government, and it's basically hush money, but none of the policies change, and none of the treatment towards our people change. I just need to be able to, if I wanted to go to the park at 6 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, to be able to do that and not have to think about my life being in jeopardy. And I think that's all I have to say.
Nduvuakim Abdusalam, you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for giving us additional education on the lives of African Americans in the United States. I think this is something that is really important and must be something that goes ahead and transcends beyond what is happening right now in the US. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, it's been an absolute pleasure. Well, you've heard Nduvuakim Abdusalam. And before I leave you, here's something I would like to say. Remember, Africans were not given an opportunity or a choice to say, well, we'd like to come to America. They weren't given written contracts by the slave owners or the colonizers. They were basically dragged with shackles and chains, put into ships with 40 to 50 people. Imagine that. Picture that for a moment. Brought to America and made to work on the plantations, and basically made to work to go ahead and build the United States. Then, of course, the American War of Independence happened. Black people were allowed to go ahead and exercise certain freedoms, but until the southern parts of America decided they needed to go ahead and make slavery legal, which means slave trade was available to any of the southern plantation owners or any of the rich southern owners that were there. Then, of course, Abraham Lincoln launched the American Civil War, which gave rise to freedoms for a lot of African Americans. Fast forward many years after that, we had the civil rights movement happening in the 1950s in the 1960s. The names of Rosa Parks, Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all fought to go ahead and make sure that black people have some sort of franchisement within the society. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. The murder of George Floyd is a classic example of what is going on. After 400 years of slavery, black people in America continue to suffer from whatever system is given to them. And it's more worse now under the presidency of Donald Trump. But we also need to look at home and see what's happening with black Africans. They are still disenfranchised even after 26 years of democracy. You just need to drive into the townships and give an understanding. I was able to go ahead and experience that before I joined ITV, going into the townships and seeing how difficult it is for so many black Africans. They've been promised so much by the party they voted, and unfortunately, nothing has been delivered. If you want to make an impact at home, and there's something I am definitely willing to go ahead and enhance from my perspective, treat the person that is there at home, be it your domestic worker, be it the gardener, be it the cleaner, whoever it is. They're not asking for a lot of money. They're not asking to be millionaires. All they're asking for you is to treat them as a human being. And it doesn't cost a cent for you to treat them as a human being. If we can start there, if we can make sure that that is achieved, we can erode racism and make sure there's an equal society for everyone at home. My name is Faraz Patel. This has been Truth to Power. Please join us again next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.